All righty, well, we're letting it load. All right, we're all good to get started. All right, so for the sake of formality, hello everyone. My name is Shelby Marie Edwards. I use she, her, and hers, and I'm the executive director of PHAR, which stands for the Charlottesville Public Housing Association of Residents. I've been in this role for about 2 years, and I'm really excited to be partnering with Charlottesville City Schools to have this mini event. For those of you who don't know, PHAR is a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to advocating for and with public housing residents. So you will notice a lot of these questions are geared and towards and center low-income housing residents, and that's intentional, but we will be taking questions from the greater public. And we are also the duly recognized and federally mandated representative of all residents in public housing, and we work closely with what are separated from the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So I will talk a little bit more about PHAR towards the ends of this meeting because I do want to go ahead and get into the nitty gritty. So if our friends from CCS could introduce themselves and say your pronouns if you're comfortable, I'd really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and start with Dr. Gurley.
I am Royal Gurley, superintendent of schools, and I use he, him.
Awesome. Ms. Johnson.
Which one? I'll go first. Good evening, everyone. My name is Denise Johnson. I'm the supervisor of equity and inclusion for the division. It's good to be with you all.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bianca Johnson. I'm the family engagement coordinator for Charlottesville City Schools. I use she, her, and her pronouns.
Wonderful. Thank you. So because of the amount of people in this group, we're actually not going to go around and do introductions for everybody, but we're going to go ahead and start off with our questions. So I did send some of these questions in advance. As questions come up, you're welcome to either PM me or DM PHAR on any of our social media websites. We'll grab your questions and be able to integrate it into the conversation. So yeah, Dr. Gurley, I don't know if you can read the question aloud first. And I thought I heard my name.
Yes, my name is Joy Johnson. And I'm a public housing resident, and I work for CRHA, and I'm the chair of PHAR. Carry on.
Thank you so much, Joy. We really appreciate you representing West Haven. And that's actually a good segue. We do have a couple of different PHAR staffers that are at different sites. So I have renamed a couple of folks. Does anyone else feel so inclined to introduce themselves? You're more than welcome.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm a junior community organizer with PHAR.
Awesome. Thanks y'all so much. All right, Dr. Gurley. So let's go ahead and pop on to the first question that we sent you earlier today. How do students sign up to ride the bus? And as a follow-up, how were students picked up from the bus, and how are they notified if they've been picked to ride the bus?
Okay, so throughout the summer, there's a process that kind of predates me where where we have our families to re-register at the end of every school year, well, towards the beginning of every school year. So over the summer, we have been soliciting to our families to go ahead into Power School and get your information updated and indicate, and in that process, you will indicate whether your child needs transportation for the upcoming school year. And so as a part of, and just for contextual purposes, I just want to make sure that you know that the transportation does not fall under the auspices of the public schools. It is actually an entity of the city transportation office. So what we do is we take the information that we gather from our families, and then we give that information over to the city transportation office. On last Sunday, which was I think last Sunday was the 12th, maybe. We had on last Sunday, we did communicate to our families what students are within the walking zones, which students are on the bus, which students are on a wait list. So we've communicated that information. So that was the start of it. And so as a part of that process, parents did have to indicate whether or not needing transportation was a necessity. And these were our families who were outside of the walk zones.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. And then another question that you might have answered, but is it too late to sign up to be a bus rider?
So it is not too late to sign up to be a bus rider, but their next wave of transportation will happen in October. So this will happen in different increments in terms of as we onboard more drivers and we are able to assess how many students are actually using transportation, how many students need transportation. So as students come off, we can put more students on. So that process will be fluid, but the next round so most certainly parents can can indicate whether their child needs a bus. The next wave is October, but most certainly if there's some form of a hardship, please make sure that this is our families who are outside the walk zone. If there's some type of hardship, just please let the principal know so that they can be in communication with myself or someone from the district administration office, and then we can assess those cases as needed.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go slightly out of order from the questions.
That's fine.
Thank you. Can you talk to us a little bit about what constitutes a walk zone and what doesn't make up a walk zone?
Absolutely. So we have been using this term interchangeably with family responsibility zone. And so prior to this year, at the elementary level, the walk zone was 0.3 of a mile, which when you look at comparable cities and cities around the nation and cities in Virginia, that was the smallest walk zone. And then prior to that, I think the walk zone for the high school was maybe 0.75 of a mile. I think it was between 0.75 of a mile and a mile. So that was pre this process. So once we decided, we started working on this back in June. So when we said, okay, we're going to kind of solve some of our own problems here. We're going to create a healthier city. So we decided at the elementary, what we would do is we would go from 0.3 of a mile to 0.75 of a mile. So that was 0.75 for elementary schools. And then we said we would expand the walk zone or family responsibility zone. We would expand it at the secondary level to 1.25 miles. So that's the walk zone. And then when you hear us say family responsibility zone, it's, these are the areas for which as a family, I need to make some decisions. How do I want to get my child to school? And we can talk about, if you want me to talk about it now, we can talk about some of the options that within the family responsibility zone, what will be available to our students, or I can address that at another time with some of the other questions. It's up to you.
We're kind of flowing into it now, so I would say go ahead and feel free to tackle it.
All righty. So some of the things that we are doing right now in terms of inside of that family responsibility zone, for example, in the West Haven community, because I know that West Haven is being represented here. Some of the things that we are doing, we will have staff members who will be coming out to the West Haven community, who will be walking with students. Initially, we coined the phrase walking school buses, but that can be a little confusing. So what we decided to do, we will have a staff member who will essentially, almost like a line leader, who will come and get students and walk with students to the schools. And so, which that kind of takes some of that burden off of our families. And so they will be walking with our students to and from. And so that will be a CCS employee. We will have a regular schedule. And so that's just a way to kind of ensure that our students can get to school. They can get to school safely. It's a CCS staff member, and they will be using the safe. They will be using our safe routes. They'll be using the safe routes that we've identified to the school.
Is this, so I'm gonna ask a follow-up, and then I see the West Haven team has a question. So
Okay.
is this something that will be, and then Beth, I see your hand, we'll call you after that. So in terms of the walking school bus, which is a really interesting term, cool. I also wonder, what about when it's like cold outside? What are the logistics around that?
Absolutely. So we've had some of our community partners, and I will say that Mary Coleman was one of the first ones to reach out to us. Ms. Coleman said, on those rainy days, most certainly on a good day, we can't be the shuttle. But one thing that she's immediately said is that I want to use my vans to be a shuttle on the rainy days, to kind of help our students out. If we have some if there's going to be some days that we know that the temperatures are much colder than normal or usual, then that she said that could be a day we could be a shuttle. And I want to also make sure that I say that that we do take those things into consideration too. Like when we are talking about inclement weather and when schools are open and closed. And so if there's some abnormally cold day planned, then that may be a day that's already on our radar in terms of, is there a delay on that day so that schools can, we can let it warm up a little bit. So those are things that we already do. Those are some things that we do already anyway. But we have had community partners who said on those rainy days, we want to lean into the work. We also will be providing ponchos and galoshes and things like that to kind of help address some of those bad weather days. And we will be providing that. We'll be providing that from the schools. And so that's some of the work. So that's some of how we are leaning into it. And then also we'll be utilizing our community partners in terms of helping our students get to school.
Thank you so much. And
You're
I
welcome.
just got a message that I want to reiterate. Yes, we've called out West Haven and 6th Street is here, but we are making sure that we take into consideration all public housing sites. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I was just using them because I remember they did the introduction.
Awesome. West Haven Box, I've prompted you to speak.
So my question is, if it's a chaperone, a line leader, and there's 15 kids, is it just one chaperone or is it like two? Also, is there a number of kids that can be in that line walking to school?
Absolutely. So that's a very good question. So Ms. Powell and her team have been spearheading this portion of the project. So it's going to take more than 2 people, most certainly, to get our students to the school. When we went out to do the walk ourselves, we did the walk with a few students, and I know I was at the front of the line, and it was just 2. I think it was 2 of us with the group of students that we had, and it takes some very intentional work, because it's just like driving a school bus. A lot happens on the school bus, and the same things some of the same challenges present itself in this. So yes, ma'am, this is more than 2 adults. We've identified quite a few people who will lean into this work. We are also making this one of our paid positions. So that, and I will also solicit that if you know someone interested in doing this work, that we are paying people a minimum minimum number of hours per day to do this work. And it is a $16 an hour position, but we are still soliciting people. We have coverage. It's more than just 2. We quickly recognized that it would take more than 2 people to get our students to and from the school safely.
Yes. So another question, since it's, all this coronavirus is, up at a rate, the monkeypox, bus shortage, why isn't it a Zoom, going back to Zoom?
To go back to, what was that?
Zoom.
To virtual.
Oh, to virtual. Okay. I feel like the best place, I mean, a lot of inequities happen. I think that most people can agree that a lot of inequities presented itself for our students when we went to virtual. I think we have proven that we can keep our students safe during in-person learning. And so I feel that way. I stand behind that. I think that we can, while this presents itself as an immediate challenge, I think we all can agree that challenges create opportunities. I think we will be better. There will be a lot of lessons learned from this, but I don't think that this is one of those instances where we need to be talking about virtual because we can get our students to school safely, and we know that we can keep our students safe once they get there.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and hear from Beth. What you got?
Hi, I have a couple of questions. So my first is just about the family responsibility zones. So is the only factor just the distance, or does it matter the presence and quality of sidewalks? Like if a street isn't walkable, is it still part of this zone?
Right. So we did. So as a part of this initial process, and as I stated, we started this back in June. So when we started this back in June, the first thing we did was walked. We walked every area that we want our students to walk. And so some of the areas that we walked initially did not have the infrastructure. So just as you stated, the sidewalk didn't present itself. One area we wanted students to go up to this intersection, and we just said, no, I think we need to retool this and let's look at an alternate route. So the infrastructure does present itself, is there for all of this. I know one of the big concerns was like the 10th and Page. It's very busy through that area. One thing that we're doing there is we're putting our priority one was to put a crossing guard at the intersection of 10th and Page. And then we also talked about as they make the turn, I believe that's 11th or 11 and a half. I think it's 11. When they go up 11 and they get to LMA, we wanted to make sure that we had a staff member there because the sidewalk is actually opposite the street of LMA. So we wanted to make sure that we had a body because we knew that initially the walk zone had the students to walk all the way down and walk around the street. We figured, hey, I've been a child. It's easier if I just cut across the field and go up to Venerable. Why would I make a whole loop around the school? So, but we knew an adult needed to be there to help those kids get across the street. So we modified routes where there weren't good streets, and then where we knew that it was high traffic or kids needed to cross the street, we wanted to make sure that that the crosswalk was there, but also that we had an adult there to ensure that the students could get across the street safely.
Okay. My second question was just clarification on, so Mary Coleman has offered her vans as shuttles on bad weather days. I'm sorry, it's not a familiar name to me. I'm just trying to understand, is this this would be a school program? This would be would this be one person who's just kind of volunteering? Can you just talk a bit more about what that means to have someone step in and volunteer their vans as shuttles?
Yes. So I think part of what we've been trying to do is link people. So I know there are representatives from each one of the communities. And so I know that there are voices on here today that represent 6th Street, that represent West Haven and various other communities. So what we've been doing is we've not been taking on the responsibility because part of this is once we get kind of intertwining all of these things, then the level of it just changes things. So we're saying we can be the conduit and we can connect you to the person you need to be connected to, but ultimately figure out what works best for your community and then let us know. And so that's why, I want to make sure that even as we talk about family responsibility zones, that, we are saying that we can help to support you, but we really need to know what we need to do to help you make the best choices for your students. So, and that's the same thing we're doing as it relates to like connecting resources from the community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the questions, Beth. We actually got a DM from the 6th Street box. So their question is, would virtual schooling eventually become an option if it becomes an issue of attendance for the child? So I'm guessing if like the kid can't come to school or can't catch the bus or is no longer able to walk, I think that's the vein that this question is coming in.
Okay, so when we start talking about students and what my first thing is, what's the barrier? So we've been talking about student success meetings, and a student success meeting is if a student is experiencing some challenges, we really are trying to find the reason why, like what's the antecedent in this whole situation. So if the student can't get to school, then the team at the school would come together and talk about what's the issue here. Why can't the student get to school? Because, you know, one, we are putting people in place to assist families with helping their littles get to schools. So like, we really want to problem solve this. I want to make sure that, I mean, there are instances when virtual and when we entered the pandemic, when virtual was very much so applicable. I think in the vein, in the context of what we're talking about right now, in terms of expanding the walk zones, this isn't something that can't be accomplished. It's gonna require people to, you know, plan a little differently for your household. But I don't think that this is one of the times where we need to be talking about virtual. And the only reason why I say that is because virtual set our children behind, particularly our children of color. We saw that the gap continued to widen, that the students who were going to school in person and the students who remained on virtual, that they were getting further and further behind. And so most certainly if the conversation pivots to a virtual conversation, but I don't think that this is one of the times that I'm introducing any language about virtual learning.
Thank you. And then I have a follow-up question from 6th Street, but it kind of relates to one of the questions that we sent earlier. You know, what about when kids miss too many days, and what if social service has to get involved? And then I'm trying to find the question that I had earlier that was related to this. I can't remember, but if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so I mean, most certainly, I don't think that we don't work from a lens of, we don't work from the lens of, you know, calling social services. We really try to problem solve and address what's going on with the whole family. I've said to our team, if a student misses one day, let's not wait till a student misses 3 days to see what's going on with the student. When a student misses one day, I need you to reach out to mom and dad. So, and this is really the conversation where it starts with our teachers. Just, hey, you know, student was missing today, didn't show up to school. You know, why was he absent? And if mom, dad says, well, you know, wasn't feeling well today, he'll be back tomorrow. Great. But if this is, okay, now we're at 2 days, am I seeing a pattern? Is there something that we can do to help you? I think that we can problem solve this as we always do. We problem solve this at the school level first, and we typically don't go the route of in our initial conversations talking about social services. I think that these are those times where our families just have to be transparent with us and say, this is what's going on, so that if we need to do a little bit of nudging, if we need to problem solve and see, you know, how we can get to this, ensure that the student gets to school. But we don't want this to be something that's punitive for the families at all.
Thank you so much. So as another question, so for parents that work, will there be an updated attendance system that once attendance is recorded, that parents can receive an email or text alerting them when their kid is present and or absent?
Okay, absolutely. So we use PowerSchool. So one thing that we are, you know, the various representatives from your communities, I think the first thing that we can do is just encourage our families to all download the PowerSchool app. for multiple reasons. One, it's a great way to ensure you know what's going on with your child's academic progress. So that's one way. But then the second thing is that attendance is done daily. If you have a high schooler, then the attendance is done. The attendance is done by period. But this is a great way to log in, and if just create. You can set some alerts. You can set some alerts and reminders for yourself that hey, I'm going to go in and check my child's attendance. I want to make sure that they're at school, and then you can see whether they're marked present. Now, for our students that are marked absent, there is a time period in the day where, particularly, I can speak at elementary right offhand, that they make the calls at elementary just to check in and say, hey, your child was absent from school. Your child was absent from school today. Can you tell me, can you give me the reason why so I can indicate it in the computer? So that's something that has always happened. And I think that as now and where we are, we can leverage that a little bit more and use that to our benefit, just to know, hey, that's our check-in, and know that my child made it to school safely today.
Awesome, thank you. So it looks like Bianca Johnson from CCS went ahead and put the link in the chat for those of you who are listening live. Subscribe to PHAR's newsletter list, because we will be including this in an e-blast so that you can have updated information. But I believe that is where you can sign up for Power School. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Amazing. So for those listening, that's charlottesvilleschools.org/Power School, Power and School spelled POWERSCHOOL. All right, let's go on to the next question. And some of these you kind of touched on, but it doesn't hurt to reiterate it. So is there a suggested or safest route mapped out for kids to use? I'm thinking as far as like walking. And is there any collaboration with businesses that to maybe open early, to be community supervising kids walking and creating safe spaces along the routes?
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to make sure that I say, just to follow up to your Power School outreach, is that there are some codes that they will need to get their child set up. But if they reach out to the school will be the school most certainly will help them with regards to getting that set up. So with regards to the safe routes, we've been saying that these are the common paths that students are taking. And so we've mapped out, if you go to our charlottesvilleschools.org/transportation, we have all things related to our transportation and walking zones located there. And so those are the common paths that our students will take. And when we say our common paths, those routes do have very high visibility. We know that those are the paths that are frequent. Those are the paths that have been frequently taken. So those are the suggested routes that we're going to give. We have been encouraging our families, just as we've gone out and we walked all of these routes that we've asked people to do. We are also asking our families, just go out and make sure that you walk the path. Make sure that from your end, you understand the direction that the path that has been essentially assigned. But as a family, if you choose to deviate from that path slightly, then that's a family choice. But make sure that you have identified for a family what's the route that we plan to take to school each and every day.
All right, thank you. Our West Haven box has a question.
Sure.
So I think that as far as like kidnapping rates, I think all that will now start to increase, because these predators are going to be waiting around the corner, waiting at the end of the sidewalk for someone's child to walk by and just snatch them up. What are we doing about that? Like, what can we,
No, I think that's a very valid question. I think one thing that I would say is that when you look at the health of Charlottesville City, it's a safe city.
Don't no parent want to worry if my child gonna get to school or be kidnapped. You know, I don't want to worry about that. I'm sure any other parent on the call don't want to have to worry about that.
Absolutely. So I think we have, a couple of things that we can consider here. So for our elementary students, we're going to have our walking school buses. For our middle school age students, we are encouraging them to walk in pairs. I will tell you that from my time going out into the community, and I've gone out to every community, every child, I've come across families who said, well, my child was already doing a little bit of the walking anyway, because they were missing the bus quite frequently and they were walking over to the schools. I do think that there's some conversations that we have to have with our children. My parents had those conversations with us just about being, I want my child to be vigilant anyway. Make sure you always know your surroundings. Make sure you are always walking with a buddy. So I think for our elementary children, we're not asking them to walk by themselves. We're sending a staff member out. But then even, or you can choose to walk with your child even if you don't want them to come up, walk with the staff member. But then as for our older students, say if the student is walking to Beaufort, then what I would just encourage there is just to continue to walk in pairs. But I know that they were doing this already anyway. And I heard that from a lot of our families that, our kids were missing the bus and they were walking anyway. But I do think that I do understand where your concern comes from. So I appreciate you expressing that concern. But I do think that overall, what we've seen is that we live in a safe city.
What I wonder is in the same line of safety, and this is one of the questions we had too, will there be an increase? Go ahead.
Right quick.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but so I know you said that this is a talk that the parents have to have. Is there like a talk that the teachers can have with the students as well?
Absolutely. So we have these types of programs within our schools. So we had bike safety in our schools, but these are all things that we will be pushing into our school because it is about I think this is not about what we want parents to do. This is about what we have to do as a school and a school community. And so I want to make sure that I'm very clear that I'm not saying, parents, this is what you have to do and you have to do it alone. I think we are all in this. I think we are all hands on deck. But most certainly it is a conversation parents have, but then we have to also make sure that we are reinforcing these conversations as well about just making sure that you're being safe on your walks. If you're walking with school staff, what does it look like when you're walking with school staff back to your neighborhoods? Because just like we talked about bus safety, we practice bus safety. The same thing, walking safety is just as important. So I appreciate your question, and I think that that's probably a question on the mind of many.
No problem. So one, I'm gonna ask another question is, what's the distance or like time frame it takes for if Burley Moran kids had to walk to if West Haven had to walk to Burley Moran, what is the distance? Like, how long would it take to get there?
I'm not sure, but West Haven students don't have to walk to Burley Moran. So the students the West Haven students who were going to Burley Moran still will get transportation to Burley Moran. So they don't have to walk there.
So I have a follow-up question. The resident is not here today, but she brought to our attention that even throughout the school year, there were some kids who weren't on the bus list, and there were some kids who were off the bus list that their parents had to take them. Will that be the same? I wish she was here to ask the question. I think I'm answering.
I think I know what you're saying. And I think that is what we talked about in one of those initial questions. So there is that bus priority list. And so that list will come the next round of it. So we have the list that went out on Sunday, but then the next round will be in, I think it's around October, if I'm not mistaken. And so that list will come out then. And then that's where some students that had a seat on the bus, if they didn't use it, they may be taken off the bus. And that's where some students who need the bus that were on a waiting list, they may be put on the bus list. So that's how that process works. We did that last school year, and we will do that again next school year.
So how would the kid get to Berlin Moran if they're not on the list?
I can follow up and send that back out. I can make sure we communicate that. If we communicate that, I'm not certain that, so if a student is going to Berlin Moran, there may be a chance that if the parent did not complete the pre-registration, that they may not be on that list. But most certainly, I believe that's a separate bus anyway. So that may not be too much of an issue. But we can get that answer, and then we can push that back out. And so if any parent didn't get the message on Sunday, though, then all they need to do is call to the school to check their child's status.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question.
So I'll go ahead with another question. Let's say a child has to walk 25 minutes to school, any school, whether it's, I want to aim it mainly at any school, honestly, high school, middle, elementary. Do you think a child can walk to school and go to school and have a good day?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. I mean, what I heard students say is that they were doing this anyway. Now, if you have to do it every day, I think it changes the lens. It may change their lens, but I believe, yes, absolutely, our students can do this every day. I think that most of the time, it's us. We have fears. We're very protective of our children. So I think once we kind of get over our heel, then the kids are like, we'll be okay. And so, yes, I do think that students can do, I believe students can do it. I mean, we walked from the West Haven community to Venable, and, we talked along our way, and we just carried on. We enjoyed that day. But it took us about 16 minutes. But then as we were walking back, we saw a parent, and she said, how did your walk go? And he said, it wasn't bad. It took us about 15, 16 minutes. And she said, I could do that me and my child, we do that at about 12 minutes on a good day, on a bad day. So I just think it depends on the child. It depends on what you have going on that day. But I do think it's something that we can do. I do believe in us.
I'm gonna say now, I disagree. I'm a person like me, I got bad legs. So if I gotta walk my child to and from school, it's oh my God, it's gonna be a disaster. I know that.
But I guess I guess the question that we're posing to our families is that if we have the staff members coming out to your community to walk with your students, do you feel like that's a viable option, that you have staff members, a responsible adult who's been vetted, that's a viable option for your child to get to school?
Yeah, yes, but I'm gonna ask, is there, you say a responsible adult, are we doing like, I wanna say like background checks and,
Absolutely.
The adult and, stuff of that sort for me to extend, myself and trust my child with them?
Absolutely. Every employee of Charlottesville City Schools goes through a background check. They go through a police background check, and they have the background check from our social services. So it goes through the Virginia State Police Department, because they give their fingerprints, and they have to have a social services background. And you cannot work in the school system if you have a felony. So
okay.
So, yeah.
sorry to cut you off. So they are, so a volunteer would be considered Charlottesville City Schools or just a volunteer?
Well, anyone who volunteers, anyone who comes in contact with our children must go through they submit they have to complete a background check.
Yes.
And then, just like we do with our people who come into our schools, if you come into the school, you have to give your license, and we run everyone through the sex offender registry. So those are all things that we do currently, and we would continue to do. Our job is, we're not just going to put some random person off the street with your child. That's not our goal and intent. We're not going to cut corners and risk our children's safety.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I appreciate you. You asked me some hard questions.
I am going to ask one last question for right now. I can't promise that's going to be the end, but
Sure.
There is a chaperone making sure the kids are getting to school and back to school, right? Or is it just to school?
To and from, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So my next question for you, Dr. Gurley, is and this is from a YouTube participant. And the person would like to know, will there be a CCS safety member assigned to all 8 routes?
8 routes. And I guess I'm going to need someone from the team. When we say 8 routes, what are we referring to?
I don't know. If the person on YouTube is still listening, if you want to elaborate.
It looks like she's going to answer. What's the 8?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the 8 routes refers to. So I would be curious to know about that. But I do think the one thing that is for sure, Ms. Powell's on those maps, she indicated kind of the minimum of where we would have school crossing guards with those stars. So that would be one indicator for sure. As you're looking, you'll know for sure if there's a star on that map, that's 100% sure where there's a crossing guard. And I don't know off the top of my head exactly. I'm not sure what the 8 routes are, or 100% sure exactly where the crossing guard support is going to be right now.
I think
Someone
probably
said, Peter said, I bet the 8 routes are the 8 schools that have maps. Yeah, maybe. So I guess if I just answer that, thank you for that, Peter. I guess if I answer that question generally, that so those, just like Ms. Chuck said, we've identified all the major intersections that are applicable to any school and school route. So we know that we have those covered. We do have the walking school buses, and in some cases, we are even doing some staging on some corridors because of the volume of students. So to go back to the original, this will take more than just 2 adults to help get students to schools. So for the safety aspects of all of these routes are covered. I don't think that we don't have any worries with regards to that.
I know that crossing guards came up. Do you know if there will be an increase in crossing guards so that kids can safely pass through busy intersections? And are there any job opportunities, perhaps?
Absolutely. We love plugging our job opportunities. So if you go on our website right now, we do have positions open for crossing guards. And as I stated earlier, it's a great opportunity if you just want to make a little extra money, but not have to work all day. So you're going to get paid a minimum of 1 hour. You're going to get paid a minimum of an hour. So if your shift is 45 minutes, you're going to get paid an hour. And I have a list here, and I think this list has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has a lot of places on it, but on it, Ms. Powell has noted all the places where crossing guards have been assigned. And so we've added. So I think we've literally doubled the number of crossing guards that we will have throughout the city. So yes, the safety aspects of this will be covered.
And I do want to be clear. I don't believe that Ms. Powell has a walking, on those maps for the schools, it shows some lines and some colors about where kids will be walking. those lines and colors do not mean that there will be a walking school bus at every single one of those lines. That's really just to indicate these are places where the schools have told us that their kids usually walk. And then where you see those stars, that's where there will be a crossing guard to support students. So within that, I know there are some corridors where we just know there are a lot of kids who walk. And I think those are the spots where Ms. Powell has planned for those walking school buses. And I think the other thing that we will just say is that we're just going to be responding to the needs. And that as we learn, the walking school bus, that didn't actually work quite the way that we thought we would. So we're going to try to, now we're going to try to staff our adults out so that as kids come, every block or two, there's going to be an adult to keep an eye on them. These are all ideas that community members like you all have suggested to us. And so we may just have to figure out what works best. And we're going to be relying on feedback and suggestions from folks like you.
Yep, and someone has dropped the link. I think that was Mr. Peter, dropped the link to our crossing guard position. It's located there. Ms. Torres made a very good point about even if you want to be, you can complete the application, and even if you want to be a sub, you can go through our training. You can go through the training so that you can be on call. I mean, this is really an all hands on deck effort. And we just been appreciative of the response thus far. I mean, none of this would have been, could happen without you, without the hard questions that we've been getting to make us think differently. So we're definitely not sitting in silos when it comes to thinking about what needs to happen, what needs to happen next.
All right, thank you, thank you. So I know we've got about 10 more minutes left. I want to hit the West Haven box one more time. I have a couple of more questions and then we'll wrap up.
So my last question is if a kid is on the 10th and page, or I just use it as the example, and you know how that can go to either Venable or Burley Moran, would it be possible for the kids to, for 10th and page to choose, like switch to Venable to get them there closer?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, if a Burnley Moran, if a student is in the 10th and page area and West Haven area, if that student is currently going to Burnley Moran and would like to go to Venable, most certainly, they can complete the waiver, and we won't be doing that long. That's a whole separate conversation, but most certainly we can work on getting them to Venable. What we can't do is switch students from, if they were currently going to Venable, now switch them to Burnley Moran because there's a bus. It can't work that way because this process is not that fluid, because it is very much, we have mapped out how many seats are available. And so it can't happen in the reverse, but most certainly, to your point, yes, we can make that happen, because my goal is I would love to see all of the students that are in that area go to their neighborhood school anyway, because that's the way it should have been for years. But that's a whole different conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're calling a spade a spade. I know this isn't the space to talk about Charlottesville City history, but I really do appreciate you naming that exactly what it is.
Well, we'll be talking about it at our school board meeting. We'll be, Ms. Johnson and team will be doing a presentation to the school board in September, and we will be talking about how we can transition our students who are in that community to transition them back to the school that is the closest to their home, which is Venable.
Thank you. So we have a question from some of our residents at 6th Street. They want to know, will the people helping doing, I guess, the chaperoning be wearing masks?
Be wearing masks. I guess they could. I mean, we're out. We'll be outside, so I guess that's that may be employee choice, because they do have the choice of whether they want to wear a mask outside. I'm not sure what the exact answer will be, because that's kind of based on, that's employee choice when they're outside. Right now, the mandate is that all employees must wear a mask when we're indoors.
Okay. All right, second to last question.
Sure.
What is, for now anyway, what is being done to get more drivers, and has there been any connection with CAT and UVA transit? And if this is above anybody's ability to answer, that's okay, but we did want to pose the question.
We've been working with the city all summer long. They've been very responsive. I know that they have been actively recruiting. I guess I saw that question earlier about in terms of UVA. There's not been a lot of partnership in terms of with UVA because essentially UVA is one of their competitors in terms of employees. But I know that in that competition with UVA, I know that the city is looking to increase the driver starting pay. So maybe we can attract some of the people who were going out to the county or going out to UVA. They want to try to attract them to stay within the city transit system. So I know that that's what's happening right now. I think Ms. Powell said they have 3 people that are currently in line they're in the class right now to become drivers. So I know that that's happening currently. So we're looking to get, I know in the question you asked earlier, like what's the trend? Well, no, I think somebody asked me earlier, like what's the trend? And we know that last year we were at this number, we're around that 7-9 mark last year. And as the school year increases, hopefully we will be onboarding people so that we can get back up to the number, to at least the number we were when we were in June, which was around 22.
And if folks have any more questions, who should they contact, and when and why and how?
Well, some of it is depending on what the question is. So if there's something about a need, always reach out to your schools. I feel like the principals have been very responsive. That's always your first line of defense. Always think of it kind of like the chain of command. But most certainly, if you have some questions and you feel like something's not getting resolved when it comes to transportation, you can give Ms. Powell a phone call. You can give anybody at the district office. We're trying to be customer service oriented and make sure that we're getting back with our customers within 24 hours. So there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work happening right now, but I do feel like that we're trying to be very responsive to everyone's needs, and there's a lot of wants right now. And so I'm trying to prioritize those wants to make sure we get what our kids need.
And we got another want for you sitting in my DM. So will there be a dress code for parents or chaperone volunteers, or a certain color to indicate that they are a chaperone? I think there's also a wonder if folks, we don't want them rolling out in their PJs or anything.
Absolutely. So our staff members who will be designated to lean into this work, there's going to be a standard like umbrella. I got to see the umbrella today. It's a clear umbrella, and there's going to be something on it. So there will be this identifier that will be communicated to your community and to your school, so you know what to look for on a daily basis when we're working with kids. I mean, those are very good questions, Ms. Edwards, and I appreciate that, because that means we're all thinking the same thing, that we need to have some consistency. Our kids need to know. We need to build this capacity with them. So yes, there will be some commonalities in this process.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna riff a little bit about PHAR for the next minute or so. So if you have any last questions, please either DM us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or shoot me a message using those ways. But if you don't know anything about PHAR, PHAR is a not-for-profit organization that does focus on low-income residents. Our mission is to educate and empower our low-income residents, which is that education part. That's part of the reason we're having this dialogue, and we're so pleased to have CCS. We have 4 main programmings here at PHAR, which includes our PHAR internship program, which is a paid civic engagement opportunity for residents 18 plus. We have Residents for Respectful Research, or R3. We believe that residents have the right to participate in research being done at all levels, and this is done in partnership with UVA's Equity Center. We have community organizing, which is our bread and butter. And then we have our housing redevelopment efforts, which most people are familiar with. I encourage you to check us out. You can follow us on most social media platforms at PHARCville. And you're also welcome to reach out to me or my staff members. You can go ahead and email admin, ADMIN, at pharcville.org with any follow-up questions. So I'm taking a peek around. I don't think I've gotten any last minute questions. So without further ado, thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in. I see quite a few people from the city, and I really appreciate y'all tuning in. I can't tell if that's West Haven box waving at me or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, just thank